Welcome back to Fast Monty's Garage. Today we get to adjust our caster and camber if you have shims for your control arms. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. 2 episodes ago, click that little eye right there, we discussed bump steer on a 64 through 72 GM A body. If you don't have one of those cars, don't watch that episode. Episode 2, we discussed how to use this QuickTrick alignment tool to measure caster, camber, and toe. Well, clearly my readings were off, and today we're going to fix the caster and camber. The next video is going to discuss how to adjust for toe by string aligning the car. So that will be complicated and fun to do. So subscribe if you haven't, you don't want to miss that. So today, do us a favor, make sure you leave a comment below as to what car you have, especially if it uses these shims on the upper A-arms. That way, if anyone else visits the channel, they can check out the comments below to see, oh, hey, a 72 Mustang, it uses the shim method. That's why we do that. So, moving forward, the way you properly do alignment is measure for caster first. I'll explain why when we get to camber. Camber second. And then lastly, we do toe, which is the next episode. So, what's caster? Good question, John. Caster is your axis of rotation of your steering knuckle, and where does it sit in relative to vertical? So if it's forward, it's negative. If it's pushed towards the driver, it's positive. Most cars are positive, especially if you have a sports car, because that increases high-speed stability and actually gives you more feedback if you have power steering. So I have a power steering car, and it's actually, I can feel it. It's not like super easy to drive. So it also helps with your turn-in if you have a performance car. I, in particular, have aftermarket upper and lower A-arms, which have caster built in. My spec is 5 degrees positive. Make sure you look up your spec of what it's supposed to be before you start this process. Now, I measured 9 degrees positive last episode, which is way too much. So we're going to fix that today. So the only parts you really need besides basic wrenches and sockets are shims, duh. So I'll leave a comment below. I mean, not a comment. I'll leave a link below as to where you can get a shim kit with different thicknesses, because that's what we're going to be using today. I will also be using this as a measuring tool to check our work. I will not be telling you how to use it because that was last episode. So let's go ahead and jump under the hood and I'll show you what we're working with for the A-arms. So here's the passenger side. I have 2 1/8" shims on the back stud, nothing on the front. And the way we have to change the caster is you have to think about it as a triangle. So we have a triangle here, and this is the ball joint. We want to move the ball joint forward because I have too much positive caster. In order to do that, we have to turn this whole A-arm this way. So counterclockwise, that means taking those shims out. That's to begin with, so take these 2 shims out, measure it, see where we're at. If we need to, we start adding shims here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Just so you guys know, these studs are pressed in here, so you can actually just turn these nuts, it will loosen. You do not have to lift up the car. The weight of the car is going through that way in the stud, so it will naturally push this arm off of this surface. It might be stuck on your car. You can give it a little advance with a thick screwdriver. Just pry it off of there, it'll pop off, and go to town. Now if these are loose, there is a hex on the inside here, so you can actually put a socket on there to hold it. There we go. I'll take those out, do a remeasure, see how many degrees that saves us. Okay, no shims got us to a little over 7 degrees positive caster. Remember, I was starting with 9 degrees I had. So it's a little under 1 degree per shim. So I'm gonna go ahead and put 2 shims here and see where that gets us. After several iterations, I didn't want to bore you guys, I finally found the magic formula. So right in here are actually 2 3/4 normal shims. And I'll show you on the workbench in a second the different shim sizes. But let me show you on the gauge what it looks like. I know there's a lot going on here if you've never seen this before, but QuickTrick makes a toe plate or swivel plate, which is awesome because it's steel, it's ball bearing loaded, and it makes it very easy to turn the wheels if you're going to do caster. And that's the most difficult part of this process, is measuring caster. Now the gauge here, it says 3.4, but some MIT wizard at, you know, some brainiac figured out that that sweep, a 40 angle sweep, the difference in angle there, if you reset the gauge, times 1.5 is actually your caster. So 1.5 times 3.4 is basically, so we're looking at 5.1 degrees positive caster. So that's close enough, because I've been dicking with this for a long time. But while we're here, let me show you something. So I mentioned the plate here, the suspension is fully loaded. Check this out. I can rotate the whole suspension. How crazy is that? I love these plates. Now, if you don't have access to tow plates, your backup should be like a black plastic bag if you're on perfectly flat concrete, or even 2 pieces of cardboard with sand in the middle or salt in between them. You just need a way to easily turn your tires. It makes this process so much easier. That's why I love these so much. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about camber now. So we have our caster set, and now if you have a gauge like this, this is why this is so cool. I'm gonna go ahead and reset it by putting it behind the wheel and reset it to 0. I reset the gauge, and before I put it on here, I want you to see how it behaves. So if I tilt it up like negative camber, notice that little arrow right there? That's telling us negative. If I go the other way, it switches to up. It's now positive. So we just put it on against the vertical stick, and we get a reading. Negative 0.3 degrees camber. So our target is negative ½ degree camber. So let me show you how to fix that. Now to talk about camber, remember we talked about our triangle? We had to pivot it to change caster. Now to change camber, we have to move it back and forth like this. So when we change it, we have to put a shim, the same shim, on each side. That's why you do caster first, because caster, once you figure that out, now you're just adding a shim, the same shim on each end to change camber. Now, let's figure out, I'm gonna put an 1/8 inch shim on each side, and let's see how the camber changes, and that'll give all of us a good idea of what one shim does to the camber setting. So I didn't remove the gauge, I left it here the whole time, and we put the new shim on, and we're looking at 0.9 degrees negative, which means we added 0.6, so roughly a ½ degree of camber is one shim. So why don't I put a ½ a shim in and see if that gets us closer? So in theory, it would be 0.3, so it would be 0.6 would be our total if we were to do a ½ a shim. So let's give that a shot. Hey-oh, look at that. Negative ½ degree. Sweetness. I'd be willing to bet there's some rounding error somewhere in the scale, but man, I'm good with 0.5. I'll probably take this out off the lift and just measure it on the concrete again just to double check, but that's how you measure it, that's how you fix it. So I'm okay with saying a ½ a shim is worth 0.25 degrees of camber, at least for my setup. If you guys have different results on your setup, leave a comment below. That's how we do things here. So let me show you on the workbench all the different shims that come in this kit. Here's the shim kit I was using. I'll leave a link below. But the biggest shims are 1/8, and the way you think about these measurements here are 1/4 of a shim, 1/2 of a shim, 1/8 of a shim. So you can get really granular on your measurements and be patient. A few things we still have to discuss. One, if you don't have a way of measuring caster, I highly recommend this kit from QuickTrick, including the toe plates or those bearing plates. They work fantastically well. You can go to their website, quicktrick.com, enter my discount code, which is QTMonty, right there, QTMonty, 10% off for you. Number 2, please leave a comment below on what car you're working on. Like if you have a 68 Mustang, it takes shims, what shims change your camber by how much? Because other people will learn from that, and hopefully this becomes like a mini forum on this one particular video. Lastly, Next episode, subscribe if you haven't, because we have to talk about toe and how to measure toe. There was a reason why you guys just learned why you do caster first, camber second, and then toe. This kit actually allows you to measure toe from wheel to wheel. I was way off. The problem with being off now is I don't know which wheel's off more than the other, so you can't just go in there and equally change each tie rod end to get your magic number. We have to do what's called string aligning. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that, and I can't wait because I want to be driving straight again with my new caster, no bump steer, etc., etc. Love it. So until next time, build them fast, drive them faster. See ya.